I just got spotlighted. So thank you. Thanks so much. I'm really happy to be part of this group. I love knowing about the resources that you have and even the support groups. I feel like I'll be sending people your way too. So thank you for doing such important work and creating such an important space for families and adults. So I will pull up my slides and then I'll just get going. Oh, actually, hold on. I want to just change one thing. I always have to get the here just right. Let me see if that's better. Okay. And everybody can see it okay? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about declarative language using a thoughtful language style to help kids and also adults with social learning differences feel competent, connected, and understood. I think a place that I always like to start these days is just saying a little bit about neurodiversity and me and my values and things that I think about as I approach individuals and families. As a professional, as a person, I always want to make authentic connections with individuals, families, and teams. It's really important to me to build positive relationships with the people that I meet along the way. So it could be the clients and the families, but it also can be the professionals that I meet. I always want to have the utmost respect for individuals and families that I work with. I am always going to be thinking in a developmental way or using a developmental framework, which just means I'm meeting everybody where they're at. So maybe for the kids that I'm working with, it means I'm meeting them, where they are at in development, which sometimes does not match their chronological age and neurotypical norms. I'm really going to think about where is this person right now in this moment. Um, but then another thing I like to think about is how that also applies to caregivers and families and professionals. We're all on our own learning journey around supporting the people that we care about. And so similarly, I'm happy to meet people where they're at in terms of learning about declarative language and supporting people using this strategy. Especially I think since 2020 and since my book came out, I'm working hard to really listen to the neurodivergent community and just learning and evolving how I speak and write to ensure that I'm always respectful, understanding, and neurodiversity affirming. So I find even some of the words or ways that I've talked about things 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they're going to be different than the way that I talk about them today. Um, and just know that I consider myself just always a work in progress. I'm always learning and trying to keep up with what's important out there. So we're definitely going to get all into declarative language, but I always just really like to start with the idea of processing because I feel like this is at the heart of so much of why this speaking style works and also how I approach the individuals that I'm working with or that I support. Um, I have a blog post called Cognitive Rigidity or Processing Time Needed. It's a four-part blog post where I really flesh out this idea. But really and truly, in my experience working with individuals, I don't perceive kids or adults as rigid. Like I know that people can be very quick to call someone rigid or stubborn or willful, but really and truly, in my experience, I know that there's processing differences between me and, say, for example, a neurodivergent individual that I'm working with. And therefore, the more I can consider what those processing differences are and be respectful of them and communicate in a way that is supportful of their processing, um, the more that we can achieve together. So really and truly, in my experience, when I slow down to give information a little bit slower with a little more detail, maybe what was perceived as rigidity gets worked through. So in my mind, it wasn't that person was rigid. It's just that their processing style needed me to be more thoughtful in the information that I was sharing and the pace with which I was doing it. Um, So in a nutshell, this kind of idea, or how I like to think about it, is that oftentimes it's not that my learner is rigid, but it's that my learner needs more time to process and integrate new information. So anytime there's a new piece of information out there that we're asking a person to take in, it could be spoken information, it could be visual information, it could be something that we smell in the air. Anytime there's new information, we have to take that piece of information and integrate it and figure out how it fits with what we already know, our current understanding of the world. Um, and it's a process. And really and truly, it will be better for all of us for lots of reasons if we can respect and embrace this aspect of the individual that we're with, of their learning style, by building in the time that they need. So information sharing can be much more smoother as we think about pacing the information that we share to give that person time to integrate it with their greater understanding of the world. And I know that's a mouthful, but it's really at the heart of this approach. So that's why I spend time here as well. And as I was explaining this idea and just my observations to a colleague of mine who's a psychologist, she just said, well, I think that's what John Piaget talks about in developmental psychology. And it's true. So this idea that we're taking in and integrating information with our current understanding of the world and then responding to it is just called assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. And we all do this. This is something that happens for all of us. But the difference maybe for our kiddos or students that we work with is that they just might need more time to move through this process than I might. So now I'm going to go back to declarative language. So we're really going to be thinking about processing information and processing social information. And what I love about declarative language that we'll really get into is that it's a concrete tool that we can use immediately that will support an individual's ability to process information in their environment or from their communication partners. And it can help us create mutual understanding um, with that person. And I always like to give a shout out to RDI. And Ellen, I know you mentioned RDI in my bio. That stands for Relationship Development Intervention. And it's a parent coaching program that supports parents to help their kids develop dynamic processing or dynamic communication. So just this idea of processing and responding to information in our world in a way that is adaptive and connects us. And I learned about declarative language from RDI. And, I didn't learn about it as a speech therapist in graduate school, but I learned about it when I was becoming an RDI consultant. And yet, this tool was so powerful to me, and I just saw its application and how much it could really help other people that I just decided to go ahead and write this book so that this particular tool could be understood and accessible to lots of different people. And that's the thing. You don't have to go to graduate school to learn how to speak in a declarative way. You just have to be reflective a little bit and listen to yourself speak and care about your own communication and know that often there's a better way. So this is a picture of me and my two boys years ago when my hair was brown. So lots of times I've been doing this for so long that I have lots of different hairstyles along the way. And my boys now are 15 and 13. But I like to show this picture just to kick us off because it shows a moment in time. And what I really love about declarative language is it's all about the moments in time that we can take a breath and think about what we say and how we say it, and know that we can really create powerful social learning opportunities when we ourselves are able to do that. So in this moment, I'm having a thought about the cereal, and there's lots of different directions I could go in that moment with my body language, with my feelings, with my thoughts to create a learning opportunity for my kids that is dynamic and may connect us and enhance their social learning. So it's all about the moment. So as a speech language pathologist, I think a lot about social communication. And to be successful social communicators, we really need to navigate and process so many things. So I'm going to go again, I'm going back to that idea of processing information or processing so many things. Um, I'm never going to just talk about social skills because there's so much more to social communication than discrete skills. Like there always will be. It's so dynamic. Just to give you a snapshot, and I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of these ideas. But in order to be successful, we have to be able to see the big picture. And for me, I think about the context that I enter. So, for example, a movie theater, I need to notice as I enter that setting, where are we at in the movie? Are the lights on or off? Um, how close or how far away is the person that I want to talk to? And taking all those variables is going to help me know how to communicate in that moment that is just right to be successful socially. I also have to be able to read nonverbal communication. It's never going to be reading nonverbal communication that is still or static or a picture, but rather nonverbal communication is really dynamic. And sometimes it's subtle and nuanced, it's ever changing. Um, but to be successful with social communication, I have to tune into that and be able to read it accurately. I have to be able to problem solve in real time. So that is different from problem solving outside of the moment or knowing what I'm supposed to do in a situation on paper, but rather I have to be able to problem solve on the ground in a moment of crisis. I have to be able to take the perspective of others. So I really have to appreciate that everybody comes with their own world experiences, their knowledge, their past history, their family, um, even in terms of immediate time. Like I might bump into someone in the street, but I have to take into account where they just came from, where they might be headed, um, and integrate, process, and navigate and integrate all that information in order to successfully communicate in that moment. I have to be able to self-regulate or just manage my own emotions and even impulses in the moment. We all have thoughts and feelings, but in order to be successful, we can't always act on those thoughts and feelings right then and there. Sometimes being successful means knowing I might have an impulse and I should leave the room so that I don't act on it. And last but not least, of course, is just being able to adjust to change in the moment. So life is ever changing and nothing is ever fully predictable. Um, but if I can take in information and that's new and adjust in the moment in kind of a smooth way, then I will be successful. And that is often what we see as or call being flexible when somebody has difficulty adjusting in the moment to change. So as I started to think about those areas, I pulled out different skills that really help work on those areas and just help us be able to process information and integrate information related to those. So I'm going to go through each of these now, or each of these 5 areas, and they also are, just for your reference, chapters 3 through 7 in Declarative Language Handbook. And again, I also want to say that RDI that I mentioned earlier just really and truly helped me think about each of these areas deeply and to consider the importance of each. So, foundation skills needed for successful social communication include first, observation. So, we need to be able to observe the environment that we're in, interpret the information that we see. So, it could be contextual information, like I told you, or like I mentioned with the movie theater, or it could be reading nonverbal communication in the moment. Like if I see that little eye roll from a student that I'm working with, can I take that in and know what it means and respond to it? And I also really like to point out here that observation is very different from eye contact. Like eye contact is not what we are talking about. And eye contact is more of a rote skill that might make it seem like somebody is paying attention, but that's really not the deep skill that we are going for. We really want to help an individual take in visual information and figure out what that means and feel comfortable responding to it. Another term that I really love is visual referencing that I learned from RDI. So again, I'm just referencing the visual information in my environment and then figuring out from there what to do. Um, so we're not going for eye contact. And also for a lot of individuals who just process information differently, having them make eye contact can be really stressful. It's hard for them to maybe process visual information and auditory information at the same time. So that's never what we want to go for. We're more so thinking about that idea of visual referencing. Another idea is episodic memory. And this just means that, as I go along in life, I gather experiences. And as soon as I am in a moment in time, if I am unsure what to do or it's a new situation, I can reflect back on my past experiences. I can find a similar but different experience, which then helps me navigate the moment I am in right now. Like it's really fascinating to think of how our brain works in this way to help novelty not feel scary if our episodic memory is easily accessible. An example I like to think about with this is an airport. Like it's possible that when you arrive in an airport that you have never been at before, you can kind of figure out what to do because you've been in other airports before, and the airport template is generally the same. So there's enough similar there that you can navigate. Um, as long as you are feeling regulated and can access that information. Another side of episodic memory is just future episodic memory, which just means anytime something important happens, we want to store that memory well so that we have it to refer to in the future the next time something similar happens. So our brains are always going past, present, future, like going back and forth between those sets of information so that we can navigate the here and now and have a successful future. We also want to be able to appreciate different opinions. We of course like ultimately want to help the kids that we work with or our own kids be able to take the perspective of others. But where I always find is the best place to start is just being in the space of appreciating different opinions. So I don't need you to take my perspective. I just want to practice being together when there's a difference between us and knowing that that's okay. So just feeling comfortable with the differences between us can lead to us being curious about the other person and what they might think and how they came to those conclusions. Um, and with the kids that we work with, we want, or that our own kids rather, um, we want them to appreciate our opinions, but we also very much have to appreciate theirs and want to understand where they're coming from. Another important skill is just feeling okay making mistakes. I know so many of the kids that I work with can be really hard on themselves when they make a mistake. But as we all know, mistakes are just a really important part of learning. And if we are paralyzed by a fear of making mistakes, then it's going to limit the new opportunities that we might take on or invite. So as we feel comfortable, or as individuals that we're with feel comfortable or feel safe making mistakes, that will then support their ability to try new things or go outside their comfort zone. And another big part of making mistakes is just gaining confidence, fixing mistakes. So nobody has to be perfect all the time. Like the goal is even be imperfect so then you can get that practice with the dynamic skill of fixing mistakes. And that's where we want to help kids get to just that comfort, trying new things, feeling okay with the mistakes, getting practice fixing the mistakes so that they build competence and resilience from there. And then last is thinking in alternatives and possibilities. So of course, we always want our kids to be flexible and go with the flow. But where I think about this too is it's always going to start at the place of thought. So anytime there's a situation that we're in, um, we want to appreciate that there's always more than one way to approach it. And that might even mean that the child that I'm with is going to approach a situation or a problem differently than I might. And that's okay. We can appreciate and gain and grow in our understanding and knowledge as we appreciate all the alternatives that are out there. That's what makes life interesting. Um, and just to give you a little example, I have a flat tire picture down there. And what I think about sometimes is that if you were to get a flat tire, um, immediately you might think about what would be the best fix in this situation. Like sometimes it's to call AAA, sometimes it's to call an Uber, sometimes it might be just to walk or take public transportation. But the more we can think in those alternatives in the moment of crisis, the more we all stay regulated as we find our path forward. So after saying all those different areas, the good news, of course, is that declarative language is a gift that we can give to our communication partners within each interaction that really helps foster and support these areas. So all these really rich, important, and dynamic um, areas of social communication and connection and competence, we can touch on all of them with the speaking style called declarative language. So before I get into what declarative language is, I like to start with what it's not because people usually recognize what it's not right away when I start talking about it. So the opposite of declarative language is imperative language. Imperative language essentially tells people what to do or what to say. It's questions or directions with a right or wrong answer. Imperative language is not flexible. It doesn't give information to individuals. It just works to get something. So it might work to get an answer, to get an action. And therefore, if it's just trying to get somebody to do something, it doesn't necessarily support understanding of what might be confusing for the individual. So remember the individual, that we're supporting is taking in a lot of information and trying to sort it out and then navigate it. Um, Imperative language doesn't support their ability to take it in, navigate it, understand it. Imperative language places demands on individuals to perform, and it often to perform right now, and therefore it creates time pressure. And if we think about time pressure on individuals, then it also means that we're not having regard for processing time or processing differences that individual might have. It's not experience sharing in nature, so it doesn't focus on our connection together or the relationship that we want to build together. It therefore doesn't create safety. That's really important for our kids. Um, and bottom line is for all of these reasons, imperative language can really create stress on individuals. And for some individuals, it can also lead to a fight, flight, freeze response, um, where they feel those demands, they feel that pressure, there's no connection happening. And when we see that fight, flight, freeze response, or when it happens, we don't see it, but what we end up seeing might be challenging behaviors on the other side. And, and then we might be focusing on the challenging behavior and how to stop the challenging behavior. But again, if we just back up a little bit and think about the communication that we're using, we can maybe not trigger that fight, flight, freeze at all while still guiding and teaching. So here are some examples of imperative language. Get in line. What color is your shirt? Say hello to grandma. Look at me. And what did I say? So again, these are all imperative because they're asking the individual to do something very specific. They're placing a demand. There's time pressure likely underneath it. There's a right or wrong answer, etc. So you can almost feel the pressure of each of those as I read them. So then in contrast, declarative language is a comment. It's thinking out loud and sharing your inner voice, your plans, your ideas. You're sharing observations. You're inviting experience sharing. So that just means you're going to be talking about your plans, your memories, your feelings, your ideas, your opinions, whatever it might be. It doesn't place demands. It's invitational in nature. Because it doesn't place demands and is invitational, it therefore gives space for personal agency and autonomy, which is very important for some of our kiddos out there. Declarative language is flexible. There's many possible responses to a declarative statement that are right and good. It supports individuals to see the big picture. And then another favorite of mine is just that it empowers individuals. So imperative language asks an individual to follow a very specific direction, whereas declarative language empowers and gives them space to be the problem solver instead. So using that higher level thinking.
Linda,
And then,
I'm going to
mhm,
interrupt you for a minute. I'm sorry. Could you
sure,
could you give an example,
of declarative language.
well, of what you're talking about? Yes. So I'll role play with you if you want, or just, you know, when you're with a kid, what could you give paint a picture for us, please?
Yeah, I'm actually going to, on the next slide, I'm going to turn those imperatives into declarative statements. So I
Okay.
think that might give examples, but then of course, like I can do more if those don't do it for you. But
Okay.
thank you. And I know like people want to get right to it, but I like to spend a lot of time just on the foundation because I think the why of declarative language is really important. Like I never want it to be just a trick to get kids to do something. It's very deep and thoughtful. Um, and so I love just when people come along with me and appreciate the depth of it. And then we're going to go to the example shortly. Thank you for asking. Um, and then the other piece I just want to say that always is important is communication is a whole package. So it's never just the words that we say. So our tone of voice, our nonverbal communication, our pace, the level of directness, like all these things matter also. So I'm going to turn those imperatives into declaratives so you can see the difference and really start to feel it. So instead of saying get in line, you could say something like, it looks like it might be time to go into school. So if you imagine that you're with your child and you're visually referencing the schoolyard and you see a line forming at the door, you're going to use this declarative statement to guide their observation also. So when you say get in line, you're telling them what to do, but you're not giving them any of the social information, any of the contextual information. But when you say it looks like it might be time to go into school, you're guiding them to be curious and to also visually reference. And then you give a little space for them to notice, take in that information, and then take the next step, which might be they walk over to the line also. Instead of saying something like, "What color is your shirt?" which might have only one answer, you could say something like, "Hey, we have the same color shirt. I like red too." So I think often people might think that in order to teach, you have to quiz, but you really don't. Like kids can pick up on information and learn information through our comments as well. So if I say, "Hey, we have the same color shirt. I like red too." From there, we can imagine the student visually referencing their shirt and then my shirt, comparing them, noticing that they're both red. They might not be exactly the same red, which automatically then leads to the idea of generalization of colors or whatever the concept might be. And then by saying I like red too, you're also starting to connect with that individual or develop that relationship together. Um, from which memories form and more good things will happen. Instead of saying, say hello to grandma, you might say something like, oh, wow, grandma is here. So again, you can picture maybe a student playing with Legos and you're not telling them what to do. You're just commenting on that change in the environment. You're giving them a moment to process that information. And then they might naturally and spontaneously pick up their head and visually reference the door to see their grandma coming in. And then what you're also doing is just leaving space for them to decide how they're going to greet their grandma. So when I use the imperative, say hello to grandma, I'm telling them what to do, maybe taking away that autonomy, maybe creating time pressure. But again, when I'm just commenting on the change in the context in the environment and leaving space for them, they get to decide how to greet. And it's, of course, going to be okay and probably even more special to that child's relationship with grandma. Instead of saying, look at me. So again, when we say look at me, it places demands on a person to take in visual information, and it might be at a time that they're not ready to take it in. However, there are times that it's important to look because there's information that we want to share. So the declarative would be, I'm worried you might miss something if you don't look. So in that moment, you're really indicating to that person that there's visual information that they probably want to see. And you're also communicating that you're caring about their learning, but then you're giving a little bit of space for them to process that information, integrate it, and then they lift up their head and they look on their own and take in that information. When we use the imperative, look at me, they might look, but that doesn't also mean they're taking in the information that's important. We want to give space and guidance to allow that person to visually reference. And then instead of, so what did I say? Like, I feel like sometimes we might use that question when we feel like somebody is not listening to us. But what I always think about is, there's so many individuals who just may struggle with language and parts of language. Um, it might be that they they heard but they forgot, or they wanted to hear us but there was a background noise, or they heard but they didn't understand. And so when we use the imperative of what did I say, like we don't really create any opportunity for them to ask for help. We just create the situation where they're going to get the answer right or they're going to get the answer wrong, which can feel shaming, and especially hard if you're struggling. So instead, the declarative is, I'm wondering if you heard what I said. So when we say something like that, we're giving space and permission for the person to say, no, I didn't hear. Can you say it again? Or I wanted to hear you, but a truck went by, so I missed it. But we're just commenting on the moment in time, giving permission to not hear while also leaving space for that individual to self-advocate at the same time. And often, that individual might give more information, which helps us learn about their learning style. So if they are to say something like, I heard you, but I didn't understand, then that teaches us like, oh, comprehension, there was a word in there that they didn't understand. Let me teach that vocabulary. So you just get it so much more rich information, or you leave space for so much more rich information when you use the declarative versus the imperative.
Linda, can I ask a quick
Hmm.
question?
Yep.
What if you have the student that says, no, I heard it, and you don't
Yeah.
ask, they didn't, or they just don't want to,
Oh,
say
yeah.
that
So
they
let
didn't
me,
hear it and they don't want to, they're embarrassed and they don't want
yeah,
to.
totally. So then I would follow up with something like, that's great. Um, I would say something like, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Would you repeat it back to me so I know that you got the message that I meant to communicate, or something like that. So it becomes about repairing a potential breakdown, not you didn't hear me. Do you know? So I come back to like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I just want to make sure you heard what I think I said. So even like you take a little bit of the ownership there.
Got it. Thank you.
And at the same time, you're modeling that communicative repair is okay and safe to do. I think some of them are really afraid to name a communication breakdown or a misunderstanding and ask for the repair. So you're just taking the time to model that as well. Um, so as I said, declarative language is a really powerful tool. We just have to try it, trust it, and be patient. And I think this is the hardest part, because this is about change that we are going to make within ourselves. Like so often we can be kid directed in what we want the child to do differently and change, what they're doing, or change their behavior, change their communication. But this is about change within, which is great because we own it. But it's also hard because we have to own it. Um, and I want to say, like, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, especially if someone is used to um, receiving imperative communication. So it's going to take a little time for this new flow to build, and also for the student maybe, or the child, like, to trust that it's different, that we're working to give information rather than get. Um, and we always want to remember that the point of declarative language is to really create ongoing dialogue that shares information respectfully, kindly, generously. And as I've said, it's not a trick to try and get kids to do something, but really and truly, we're working to change the communicative landscape from the ground up to support social information processing. Like, remember, that's always what it's going to go back to, and foster connection, because the more we're connected to that person and have that foundation of trust, the more we can get to the other things, like they feel more comfortable taking risks, they feel more comfortable making mistakes, they feel more comfortable self-advocating, they feel more comfortable saying maybe when they misunderstood something, or overall they feel more comfortable being vulnerable. So using declarative language with success can be more of an art than a science, because communication is really dynamic and it depends on both people. Um, so that's always going to be part of it. Like I can't give you a recipe. I can give you beginning elements and some nuts and bolts to get you started. But a key part of it is just really noticing your communication partner's responses as you go and knowing that you can also fine tune as you go, which can be really fun. So even that, like Joni, that example you gave me, like if you notice that, what you were going to say didn't exactly work, then I have to go back and think about like, okay, how can I reframe this? Or what might be a different declarative statement that I can use that can get at the information a little bit more, or help our perspectives meet a little bit more. So on my website, I have this declarative language cheat sheet, and I go through this in my book too. But these are just some nuts and bolts that you can include in declarative statements. You don't have to use all of them. You can kind of pick and choose. Um, just basically, declarative language is a comment, and it can be really simple, like the dog is hungry, those flowers are colorful. But you can also get higher level by pulling in, for example, cognitive verbs that can reflect our thinking. So just some nuts and bolts. Our other ones are first person pronouns that model an idea or create partnership. Words that emphasize uncertainty, possibility, and alternatives, like maybe, might, perhaps, possibly, because we want to get that alternative thinking going and help everyone feel comfortable with alternatives and possibility. As I said, cognitive verbs, there's so many great ones out there. Those are some. Think, hope, remember, forget, imagine, I don't know. Observational words or words related to our senses. So again, that's just helping the individual or guiding them to observe and notice information in their environment that you can then maybe help them understand or decode. Notice, see, hear, feel, smell, for example. And then on the bottom right, I have mindful pacing, because we always, always, always want to become comfortable with silence. We might make a declarative statement and then pause. And in that pause, we can notice how our communication partner responds, which then will guide us further on what we do next. Sometimes it's keep being quiet and give that person time to think. Or it might be giving more information as they need it. So I want to let you know. Oh, and also on that handout, as you'll see, there's more example statements too. I do want you to know that declarative language doesn't always work, but that's okay, because as I said, communication is dynamic, it's imperfect. Communication breakdowns and misunderstandings are part of life. So if you make a declarative statement and the person doesn't respond in the way that you hoped they would or you thought they might, just consider it a communication breakdown, and you can repair. You have tools to repair that communication breakdown. And these are some that I use often, or some that I find can really help. Um, but again, the mindset underneath it is that you always want to be giving information or giving scaffolding to the person. You don't want to all of a sudden start placing another demand. So if they don't respond to a declarative statement, don't ask a question. Just think about some of these other tools. So for example, maybe you could just get closer. It's possible that you were just too far away and your voice didn't travel or your words didn't travel. Sometimes we have to wait a bit longer. We need to give that individual more processing time. Sometimes adding a gesture can help. It can support comprehension in the moment. A really big one might be securing the individual's attention first. Um, if we make a declarative statement, but that individual's thoughts are elsewhere, then they might not hear our declarative statement, or they might not respond to it. So I find that it can be really helpful to get their attention, maybe by calling their name and then waiting for them to reference you. Or I might say something like, hey, I have something to tell you. Let me know when you're ready. and I'm giving them a heads up that information is coming, but I'm also letting them um, let me know when they're ready to receive that information because the person has to be ready to receive it if we want them to process it well. We can also remove or minimize distractions. That can be really helpful. Like an example of this is I can imagine, I'm playing, I want to say something to someone who's using a toy or like building with Legos or something like that, or they're holding something. And I know that that thing that they're holding or playing with is more important in that moment than my words. So I might say something like, "Hey, I have something to tell you. Would it be okay if I hold that Lego for a second while I give you this message? And then I'll give it back to you as soon as I'm done." And I might outreach my hand and wait. And as long as trust is there, the individual usually will give you that Lego for a moment. And I'll even say, "I just want to get hold it for this moment, um, so that you can hear my words because I know that Lego is really important and you're really thinking about the Lego. So I just want to give you this information and I'll hold the Lego for a minute." And then I give the information and they take it in. I can tell that they've taken it in and then I can give the Lego back. And again, like when you have that trusting relationship with a child, like that can happen pretty easily. You're just building that trust along the way. Sometimes we just have to give more information, not less. So if I say, "Oh, I notice all the kids are lining up," but the individual is not sure what that means, it just means I have to scaffold a bit more to help decode that context that they might not yet know what that means. So I notice all the kids are lining up. I think that means it's time to go into school. So all I'm doing there is I'm commenting on my observation and then I'm decoding the observation so they have it and they learn about it for next time. So this is another handout on my website, which I won't go through all of it. I'll just direct you to it. Um, there's so many different reasons that you can use declarative language. Like I always just keep thinking of more and more. Um, and you can use declarative language with varying levels of directness. Like sometimes it can be an inferential statement where you say, "Oh, I see your code on the hook." Um, But if that's too tricky for someone, if that inferential language is either stressful or tricky for them, then you can break it down further by saying, "I remember yesterday you were really happy that you had your coat because it was cold. I see your coat on the hook if you'd like to also bring it today." So my declarative language is a little bit longer, but I'm using it to really to break down what could have been an inferential statement and just really and truly give them the information in the moment that they need, reflecting on the past, planning for the future. Um, but with declarative language, you can guide an action, model an idea, invite partnership, invite self-advocacy, um, model and teach a strategy for the future, for future opportunities, etc. So on that handout, there's examples next to each of those ideas. And co-regulation is probably the most important partner to declarative language for me. Um, so there's a second book that I wrote called Co-Regulation Handbook because this idea is so important. But in this book, I talk about how you can really create partnerships with your child, which can help create positive forward momentum. So again, sometimes declarative language is not enough. And it's really helpful to have other tools to put in, and co-regulation is a really important one. So importantly, though, um, don't give up if this is a new speaking style for you. I know that changing our speaking style isn't easy, but it's really worth it, and you really do see great things happen. I'm just going to go through a couple of topics and frequently asked questions that might be coming up for you. And again, these are just different applications of declarative language. So just to mention them briefly, and then we'll get into it, is interoception, what to do when emotions are escalating. How do we create thoughtful boundaries or help our kids manage their impulses using declarative language? Sometimes people wonder if declarative language is passive aggressive, and then I just have a quick note on getting started. So some of you might be already familiar with interoception, but this is just a really important idea and concept. Essentially, it's just interoception is just our internal feelings. So for example, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I have to go to the bathroom. And we all just have these feelings often that we need to figure out what they mean. And when those feelings are uncomfortable, we have to problem solve around them. There is research out there that for neurodivergent individuals, their interoceptive awareness is decreased. So that just means that an individual might feel hungry or they might have to go to the bathroom. And all they know is that their body feels uncomfortable, but they might not know why. And if you don't know why, then you're not going to be able to know what to do about it. And where our kids might come in is that, they might be wiggly or they might be looking distracted and it might look like they're not paying attention. But at the heart of it, it could be they have to go to the bathroom and they just haven't figured that out yet, or they're not able to know what that feeling is. They just feel discomfort. Um, I want to direct you to Kelly Mahler's website. She's done a lot of great work on interoception if you want to learn more about that. But where declarative language comes in is that you can start to narrate some of those ideas or interpretations of your body as a model so that they can start to think about this for themselves or learn about their own body. So it could be something like, hey, I heard your tummy growl. I'm curious if you might be feeling hunger or something else. Wow, I drank that really fast. I was thirsty. When I have to go to the bathroom, I get wiggly and uncomfortable in my belly. I'm wondering what feeling in your body lets you know you have to pee or poop. Your cheeks are red and you are sweating. You might be hot. Maybe we could take off your coat and see if that helps. So again, you're just using declarative language to explore and be curious about, or helping the person be curious about their internal sensations. And as part of this, we never want to say that we know what another person is feeling because we don't. We know what our body is feeling, and we can use declarative language to model that as a way of teaching. But when we engage the individual that we're with these ideas, we want to enter with curiosity and invite them to think with us around how their body feels and what that could possibly mean. So I know a lot of our kids, their emotions can escalate and sometimes can escalate really quickly. So I want to just like help you know how to use declarative language in those moments. So the earlier statements that I talked about, where we pull in episodic memory and we predict and we share opinions and this sort of thing, and we problem solve. Like these are all great declarative statements when everybody is feeling regulated and can access higher level thinking well. But when an individual is starting to escalate, starting to get upset, starting to get dysregulated, you don't want to use any of those types of declarative statements because they add to the cognitive load and they won't be helpful in that moment. Instead, in my experience, the declarative statements that are most helpful when an individual is escalating are those that either mirror what they're communicating or validate what they're feeling. So, for example, you don't think this is fair. You want more screen time. You really want to buy this game. I get it. I understand. I hear you. I can see that you're upset. Um, So when kids are escalating, our only goal is to support regulation. Like, of course, we want to get to the problem solving, but we're not going to get to the problem solving when kids are dysregulated or escalating. So we have to change kind of priorities in that moment in time and just focus on supporting regulation. So again, the declarative statements that are going to support regulation first might be mirroring or validating. But sometimes we just have to really be quiet. We can't add more information because it's too much and they're overwhelmed. And that's really where you kind of have to be on the ground watching and seeing what's helpful. Like sometimes you might start to say something and the child will tell you, be quiet or maybe shut up or something like that. And that tells you I have to be quiet because they are overloaded and I can't add more information for them to process right now. I have to be quiet. Because I'm supporting their self-regulation as best that I can. I want you to know too that you can always create thoughtful boundaries using declarative language. Um, so for me, some guidelines, like when I'm thinking about when to set a limit or create a boundary, um, I really think about picking and choosing my battles. Like I want to make sure, is this boundary important? Does it involve safety? Like what is my reason for setting this limit or establishing this boundary right now? Um, I'm going to communicate it in a clear and respectful way using declarative language, and I'm going to explain my rationale concisely and allow for processing time. So, it would be great if we could say, like, you have to do this because I said so. And for some kids, that works. But I think for the kids that I work with, communicating the reason is what's going to make the difference, and it's what is going to help them integrate and process that information successfully. So there's ways to do it that are short and concise, and just know that your reasoning for giving your rationale of why you're setting a limit or creating a boundary is because you want to support their ability to process that new piece of information in the moment. The more it makes sense to them, the more they're going to be able to join you in that limit or boundary, whatever it might be. So I just wanted to give you some examples in that regard. And maybe even for kiddos in this group, I know, they quite often work on manage, or they might have a lot of impulses. So I think about how can I help this individual manage their impulses when I know they're coming or I know they might be likely. So some examples might be, I'd like to hold your hand when we walk in from the playground. The parking lot is close by, and I want to help keep you safe from moving cars. I understand you want to rip this book, but it doesn't belong to me, and I'll feel sad if it gets ruined. I'd love to hold it for you to help you manage that impulse. I love playing this game with you, but I want to help you not throw the pieces because someone could get hurt. I understand you don't want to do this, but it's important. I can explain why if you would like to know more. And I would say, like, these types of statements can work quite well as long as the child is not fully escalated. But if they're having impulses and you can find a way in to say, hey, I have something I want to share with you. If you can just create that pause in that moment for them to be ready for information, um, then these types of statements show that you care about them. You're not mad at them. You're connected to them, and you want to help them manage this aspect, um, of what's happening for them in a supportive way. So you're not in trouble for that impulse. I just really and truly want to help you manage it so that we all stay safe, stay safe. Sometimes people ask me if declarative language is passive aggressive. And what I will say is it can be if that's your intention. It's always going to come back to your intention in your communication. So if you are using a declarative statement with a snarky or impatient tone, then the individual is really going to pick up on that. Um, or the way I think about it too, I have this post where I wrote about this more in detail, but I think if the child perceives a mismatch between your spoken language and your nonverbal communication, that's going to come across as passive aggressive. So if you want to be supportive, then you want to also be thinking about your body language and your tone of voice, et cetera, so that it truly comes across as support versus a demand. And then I have this blog post on my website also just about how to get started. And, I feel like you get better with declarative language the more you use it. And I would never expect anybody to get it right all the time or even dive in fully 100% of the time if this is a new idea for you. Um, so you start small, and that's great. I think the first step is just noticing your own communication. Like, do you use a lot of imperatives? Do you ask a lot of questions? And then just start small. Maybe pick one context where you don't feel rushed, that you can just focus on making just simple comments, and that's all. Know that it's okay to make mistakes yourself. Like, this is dynamic and we're all a work in progress. And be kind and patient with yourself, because I think communication and speaking style is a habit, and it takes time to change a habit. And here are just some resources for you if you want to learn more. On my website, declarativelanguage.com, I have content sections on declarative language, episodic memory, challenging behaviors, peer interaction, playful applications of declarative language, which is just for fun. Under taking it up a level, I have that post on interoception. I have a post on declarative language in mealtime, um, declarative language and dementia, because I know it's also helpful to adults who have dementia and those profiles. And there's lots of information on co-regulation there too. I have some downloads that you can access there. Some of them I showed you tonight. And there's some interviews and recordings. If you want to hear more, just hear me keep talking about declarative language. There's lots of different ways. I know this is just a snapshot, and we went through a lot of information really quickly. But now I'm happy. If the other thing I'm sorry that I meant to say is if you would like my handouts, please feel free to email me at linda@declarativelanguage.com, and I'm happy to give you a copy of these. And I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Oh, well, thank you. Wow. Wow. That's so much information to process and to to really digest. Um, does anybody have any questions? This was this was a lot. It was and so interesting. And I loved when you gave examples because it really brought it home for me. Um, I did have a question, unless there's anybody else have a question. Um, and maybe it's more of a comment, but listening to your talk, it sounds like there's so much patience, and the absence of time pressure that's required.
Mhm.
And so I wonder if you would comment on that at all.
Yeah, well, um, I think when you see it work, your patience grows or you reframe it because it could be something like, I could take this extra 5 minutes now and slow down and we'll get there together. Or I can place pressure and try and rush, and then behaviors escalate, and then that's going to take a whole other amount of time, and we're not going to feel good. So, so it's almost like you're putting in the time proactively rather than reactively. So we stay connected, so we learn together. And then separately, I think when I do feel like time pressure, like say there's something somewhere you just have to be and it is what it is, then I certainly pull in co-regulation. Like that's one of my big strategies when I feel time pressure. Um, and that's just where I'm thinking about what responsibility here can I hold on to versus what can I give the child so that we stay connected, we get a positive forward momentum, and we get to where we need to be feeling okay. Um, and the other thing too is with declarative language, you get comfortable talking out loud. So if I am in a time crunch, then and we are connected, I'm in a much better place to even say to that child, um, like, I know this is tricky right now, but I want to let you know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking about the doctor appointment and I'm worried about being late because I know the doctor only has so much time. And I know, it's hard for you to get out the door right now. So I'm curious what I can do to help you so that can get there on time. So it's almost like you share it all without necessarily fixing the problem or making them do something, but in that whole thing, you're sharing your perspective, you're giving information about time management, you're sharing information about the doctor's perspective, you're being a little bit vulnerable. Um, so you're just in those moments like still teaching and connecting and guiding in a much richer way. But yes, it definitely is a switch if you're not used to it. But I will say, like, I think it gets easier the more you do it. Like when you're starting out, you might just start with declarative statements and you see how that goes, but then you get much more comfortable moving into declarative dialogue where you can take it to those places and even appreciate the higher level thinking and applications of it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. I'll be patient with myself.
And
Veronica,
yeah.
Veronica, hi, Veronica. Thanks for coming. Veronica has a question. She asks,
Mm,
how much ability to infer is required? In other words, what
mm.
recommendations for a child
Yeah.
that has difficulty with inferential thinking?
Yeah, then I would say you're not asking them to infer if it's hard for them. You're using declarative language even to teach the skill of inferring. So, for example, if you say, "Hey, I see your coat on the hook," and you know you're inferring so that you can get it and put it on and so we can get it out the door. But you know that statement alone is too inferential. um, then you say something like, "Hey, I see your coat on the hook." And when I say that, I'm thinking you could probably get it if you want. So you're using the inferential statement, but then automatically translating it, and the child's going to store that memory. So then the next time around, maybe you don't have to break it down as much, and you just make the inferential statement. Um, so I would say, like, whenever I make an inferential statement and I notice the person I'm with did not understand it, then that's my clue to break it down further using declarative language so that they learn in that moment what that inferential statement means.
Mm. Mm.
Um, yeah, and there's a post on my website. I think it's called like when they need or preferred direct language, and I give examples around how to break it down. Um, just for those learners for whom inferential does not come automatically or easily.
Wow, thank you. So one more question, and then we're going to have to wind up. Mete, who we saw, Mete, um,
Mhm.
I have two young adults. I'd love to be able to use this with them, but I am worried it might sound too juvenile and or passive aggressive. Any suggestions? So she gives an example. Noticing
Mhm.
the room is a huge mess. How would you use declarative language without being condescending or passive aggressive? Good question.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like I said, your intention has to be um like not passive aggressive. It has to be about giving information. I think when individuals are older and this is a change for you and they're going to notice it, then on the front end, you just name it and you just be really transparent. So you might say something like, I'm learning how to communicate in a different way. So if you hear me speaking in a different way or saying things, like I want you to know I'm not trying to be passive aggressive. I'm just really trying to do something different so that our connection is better. I might be a little clunky at first. Thank you for your patience with me. So just lay it all out there, be vulnerable, name what you're doing. So it's not like you don't have to be secretive about it. You can be really transparent. And then for an older one, like instead of just saying your room's a mess, I would say something like, um, you know, I've been thinking a lot about your room. Well, I guess where I would even back up to say, is the room important to them or is it important to you? And I would start there. If the room is important to you, then I would also name that. I would say, it just helps me feel better when your room is clean because then I can find things for laundry more easily. And I'm wondering if maybe we could clean it together. If the room isn't being clean is important for them and for their success, then I would say something like, um, I know you don't always care if your room is messy or not, but I'm thinking it might make your life a little bit easier if we organize some of these things so you can find your books more quickly when you need to. I'm wondering if you'd let me help you organize your room. So you go high level. It's not just about the room being a mess. It's like high level, like why, I would say, why is it important for this adult to have a clean room? And start there. Start with your why.
Hmm.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay, well, unfortunately, we have to stop. You've given us so many resources. I can't wait to look at your website with all those posters and teach.
Yeah.
And just to start, what I hear you saying is to start, you know, dipping a toe in the water
Hmm.
and taking it slowly and
Yep.
not beating yourself up if it doesn't work, so to speak.
Right.
So, not a bad place for all of us to begin whatever new things we're learning in life. So I want to thank you, Linda, once again for coming and
Yeah. Thank
we
you for
planned
having me.
months
And
and
I
months.
love the questions. Thanks for the really awesome questions. Those are good ones.
Oh, well, thank you. And we're getting lots of, I don't know if you can see in the chat,
Mhm.
lots of thank yous from people.